Episode 92 of the Pilot podcast takes off now.
My name is Stephen Koewler. I fly beavers and turbine otters on floats for Kenmore Air in the summertime, and in the wintertime, I winter down in Northern California playing with warbirds and old airplanes.
What is going on, Avination, and welcome back to episode number 92 of the Pilot podcast. In today's episode, I'm sitting down and talking with Stephen Koewler, who currently flies for Kenmore Air. He's flying twin otters and beavers up there and quite possibly has one of the cooler jobs in aviation. I've always been just in love with Kenmore Air and the type of flying they do up in Seattle, up in the Pacific Northwest. So I was really excited to finally talk with him and to finally get to know about what it's like to be a Kenmore Air pilot. He also does some other cool flying with warbird. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. It's one that's a little bit different than what I normally do, where it's an airline pilot and someone who wants to make as much money as possible in the industry. Stephen is mainly looking for just the most fun that he can have in aviation. And it was just great talking with him. It was great hearing that perspective, because a lot of times in aviation, we get lost and we start going after the money. We start trying to get the job that pays us the most and not worried about the kind of flying we're doing and how much fun we're actually having. So Avination, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you do, please leave us a review on iTunes. You can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/pilotthepilot. I want to give a special shout out to the Patreon of the week, Robert Wright. Thank you for being the Patreon of the week. If you would like to be the Patreon of the week and receive some cool swag, head to our Patreon page and also check out our Instagram page at pilotthepilot. Avination, I don't want to keep you much longer. I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. So without any further ado, here's Stephen. Stephen, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Pilot podcast.
Hey, not much, Justin. Thanks for giving me a call.
No problem. I'm glad it worked out. I've always wanted to talk to a Kenmore pilot. It's always kind of been an idea of mine to possibly fly for them and build my time there. Obviously, my route went somewhere else and I did other ways, but it just seemed like so much fun flying seaplanes up there.
It really is a good time. It's the only 135 gig I've ever had, but it sure is a good one. It's a lot of fun, kind of getting to do different things every day, different places.
I bet. Well, let's start back with where you came from, how you started, and why you got into aviation. What was the original inspiration for you to even get involved with aviation to start out with?
There were quite a few small little things that kind of nudged me in that direction. But the most significant was probably when I was 10 years old. I have an uncle who's a pilot. My parents don't fly, but I have one uncle who's a pilot. And he never worked professionally as a pilot other than as a CFI, kind of on the side as a side hustle. But he, when I was like 10, he invited me to come ride along with him. He was working on his CFI at the time, and a buddy of his was working on his private at the time. And he told me, he's like, yeah, you can come along, but man, we're going to be doing steep turns and stalls, and you're going to have to sit in the back, and it may not be super fun. I didn't stop me. I was in. And so I remember we were driving out to the airport, and his buddy calls. He picked me up. We're driving together. His buddy called him and had to flake at the last minute. And I just kind of looked at him with those like puppy dog eyes, like, we're not going to cancel, right? We're still going to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it worked. Yeah. And it worked. And I got to sit. He actually put me in the left seat. And I think he's kind of a practical joker kind of guy a little bit. And I think he truthfully tried to scare me. And he was trying to do steep turns and stalls. And man, I just couldn't stop laughing. I was having a good time. He let me fly a little bit.
What was the overall experience like? Were you hooked right away? Did you know this is what you want to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah, it was a done deal after that. There's always kind of been some interest prior to that. I watched Top Gun when I was like 7. I don't know how that was as a parental decision.
They need to have like some kind of statistic or stat that can show how many people, guys and girls, wanted to be a pilot because of Top Gun. Like, I feel like it'd be a pretty big number.
I think more people, it was a root cause of more people being a pilot than people are willing to admit. But I think it certainly is.
You're not the only one that's come on here and said, I watched Top Gun and I wanted to be a pilot. Like, cool. Good for Top Gun. Good job, Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Hey, well, it worked. It's worked done well for me. So
Well, cool. So what was kind of the next step? Well, so obviously you do this one flight and you realize you love aviation, but now there's this whole thing of, well, do I want to do this for a career? Do I want to do this for fun? How did you kind of differentiate your choices in aviation and what you could do?
Yeah, so I did the normal stuff of trying to go to the airport, trying to go to air shows, and doing all that stuff. Just trying to do everything I could as a kid whose parents were not involved in aviation, and I didn't know the gate code to any airports around the area there in Sacramento, where I grew up. So I didn't really have much of an outlet for any of that, really until I got my driver's license. My uncle he continued to take me up flying. Maybe we go once a year or something. Other than that, and once I got my driver's license, I played football in high school, and so I stayed pretty busy. Yeah, I didn't do anything like you did, but I stayed pretty busy with it.
I didn't do much either, so don't worry about it.
Well, at least you had one of those jobs where you got to think. I was just a hitter.
That's funny. Hey, nothing wrong with that, though. So. You got to deliver the pain.
Yeah. At least that was the goal. I don't know.
Yeah, or tried to. You're right. I don't know. Maybe you didn't.
Yeah. So I got my driver's license, and after football season ended, my senior year of high school, I needed something to do. I had a summer job, that I kind of kept going through the school year, and needed something to do on the weekends, and so I started going out to the airport and hanging out. There was an air show that started in Sacramento around that time. This would have been 2008. And there was an ad in the paper and they needed volunteers. So I volunteered for the air show. They ended up, I'm like 6'3", and like I said, I was playing football. So they're like, "Oh, you'd be a good guy for gate security." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't
want to do gate security.
I don't want to do gate security." So all I started doing, I just started showing up to all the meetings. And I lived near the airport where the air show was. I could ride my bike there if I really needed to, but I just started showing up. I started hearing airplanes coming in, a week prior to the air show, and I just started showing up out there and getting to know people. And by then, it was pretty well cemented that this is what I was going to do, and I was just hungry for it. Everywhere I could get it, that's what I did.
Did those connections you made with volunteering come back and help you further in your career?
100%.
Yeah, because I always try to, I don't know how long you've been listening or what you listen to, but I always try to preach about the connections that you make and how you can create mentors and how these people will be able to help you in your career. So it's great to hear that actually did help you.
My first job out of college. So I went to Seattle University. We can talk about that in a minute. It's kind of how I at least got through much of my private. But my first job out of college was because of the people I met volunteering at that air show. And I still have that job. It's my winter job. I've been there for 8 years almost. And so I got out of high school. I wanted to be a pilot. And what I had heard about, I've always kind of liked the Northwest. So I went and visited Seattle University when I was in high school and decided that's where I wanted to go. I thought about Embry-Riddle and San Jose State was kind of nearby, and they had an aviation program, but it was all really expensive to learn to fly in college, and that was way out of my budget or my parents' budget. And I kind of wanted that normal college experience that everybody gets. I didn't want it to be, within the aviation thing.
I know what you mean.
I didn't want to live.
Being surrounded by aviation is good, but there's also some good stuff to be around people that don't like aviation too.
Exactly, and I think socially, I probably thrived a little more because of me being into aviation was just kind of like a thing. It wasn't like the same thing that everybody else was doing, which was kind of unique. And I also got to see the world outside of aviation, which is a valuable perspective. It's not for everybody, but it is, I think, a valuable perspective. So I figured I was going to Seattle. My high school physics teacher actually was an SR-71 pilot.
What? That's incredible.
Yeah, he retired from the Air Force and decided to teach high school physics. And he kind of helped guide me. Yeah, he kind of helped guide me into a good deal. And I was good at physics and good at math, so I decided I want to get a mechanical engineering degree because most of the mechanical engineering graduates at Seattle U got jobs at Boeing. And that's all fine and dandy, but the cherry on top was that at that time, Boeing had a flying club and they were paying for they were subsidizing like 75% of flight training costs for all your ratings if you were an engineer for them.
For real?
They did.
Dang.
So yeah. So I went away to school, and then I had to take calculus, and that did not go well. I was always
You're a brave man for trying it. I didn't even try calculus. I was like, nope, I'm good. Think so.
I think I walked in there pretty cocky about it because I had never studied for a math test in my whole life and just got A's. And I get into calculus and it's a whole different ball game. And, I wish I could say that it was just your normal, oh yeah, I got out of my parents' house and went crazy and my grades suffered. But I actually really did everything I could do to do well in calculus. And so I took Calc 1 my fall quarter and got I think a D-. I took it again the second quarter and got a solid C, which I was pretty proud of. And I worked really hard to get it. And then moved on to Calc 2 and got I think I finished the course with like 45%. And I had tutors. I had, extra office hours with the professor. I mean, I was doing everything I could. It just was not working out.
What was it that wasn't working out? Just for some reason, you on the math just wouldn't click? Yeah,
it's just too theoretical, I think, for me. If you taught calculus and physics together at the same time, because they go hand in hand, and I could see, a real world application of the calculations you're doing, I think I would have done much better. But just doing it on paper and just picking arbitrary numbers, that out of a hat that aren't significant in any way, I had a real hard time with that.
Were your professors like kind of shocked at how hard you were working for it and still didn't get it? Or were they like, this is normal, this is okay?
I don't know. I think math professors are kind of a different breed. They're all borderline geniuses. They're like, well, why can't you do this? This isn't hard. You should be able to do this. I can do it. It's not hard. And I was like, well,
slow down here, buddy. All right.
Yeah. So anyway, I was talking to my dad throughout all this, and he knew I was working hard and wasn't screwing off too bad. And so we came up with a deal. I came home from school that summer, and I told him, man, I really want to learn to fly. This is what I want to do. And, I got this plan, with Boeing and with flight mechanical engineering. But this may not work out, man. Like, I'd like to start on this path before and just kind of hit the ground running when I graduate. And neither of my parents had the money to put me through flight school. They didn't know much about learning to fly, but they knew what it costs, and which is a giant red flag. But my dad was willing to. He said, "Hey, I can't pay for this. I can't. I don't have at that time. They're saying it was like $7,000 or $8,000 to get a rating, a private." And he's like, "I don't have that." He says, "But I'll get you through the first few hours, and I'll get you to solo." So my dad had a friend who was a corporate pilot flying a King Air and owned a Mooney and stuff. And, my dad sought his advice on what, he thought was a good milestone for me to reach. And my dad's deal was, if you get yourself a calculus tutor and you meet with the calculus tutor twice a week, all summer long, and you stick with that, I'll pay for you to solo. So, went down to the same flight school where I went with my uncle when he gave me my first airplane ride. That was like 9 years earlier. And went out, found an instructor. His name was Bjorn. We flew a 172 for a couple hours. And ergonomically, it doesn't really fit if you're 6'3". So ended up switching to a Cherokee 160, a Warrior, and I felt much more comfortable in that. I ended up soloing after like 7 hours.
Oh, see, that's where you messed up. You should have been like, oh, Dad, it's going to take me at least 40 hours to solo, and then I might as well just take my check ride.
Yeah, no, I should have milked it. But, it very quickly became like a drug. Like I needed my fix. And then I soloed, which is like, it's a big deal. My parents took me out to dinner with my instructor and some family. My Uncle Pete, who gave me my first airplane ride, came out to dinner, and everybody was, it was all, confetti and balloons and whatever. And like, congratulations, a big deal. Cut the back of your t-shirt out. And then my dad was like, okay, well, good luck.
Yeah, I'm done. What are you doing next?
And I, of course, didn't have any money. I had a summer job, but, they hardly paid for the gas I needed to get to and from the airport. So came back up to school and just started doing everything I could on the side to stay current as best I can. I did a lot of chair flying in my dorm room and stuff like that while I was trying to study calculus. And then probably the best thing that could have happened, and that was that Boeing went on strike that fall quarter. It was all over the newspapers here in Seattle. So one of the ways they settled that strike was that they got rid of that program where they were subsidizing the flight training costs for all their engineers. And I was like, okay, well,
bye.
Yeah. So I remember walking into my advisor's office, and you might not like what I'm about to say, but I walked into my advisor's office and said, hey, this whole deal isn't going to work for me. I wanted to get this program that they just got rid of. And he looks at me and goes, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to fly airplanes. He says, well, we don't do that here. I said, yeah, but I kind of need a 4-year degree, and I'm already got, four terms in. And if I don't get a degree at this point, my parents will kill me. So I got to do something. And he's like, well, you got a kind of a random selection of credits, lots of math and science stuff. I said, well, what can I switch to that all that credits are going to count to something? And he says, well, here's a list of things you might work. Take it home, look over it. So I took it home, and I thought, history is cool. So I started looking at the history course list, and it was like, 16th century Mongolian agriculture. And I didn't really care about that. I wasn't going to work any better than calculus was. So I walked in there the next day and said, hey, Father, Catholic school, right? So Father Raj is the name of my counselor, and said, Father Raj, man, this stuff just isn't doing it for me. And he says, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. You got to pick something. And I said, well, what are the athletes doing? What do the athletes major in? Because if those guys have time for their athletics and their practices and games and everything else, then maybe I'll have time to learn to fly on the side. And that actually
a communications degree?
He advised me communications or liberal studies, and it just so happened that liberal studies I got more credits for the classes I had already taken if I went the liberal studies route.
Yeah, I think at Ohio State, it was strategic communications. So it's like a step below the business school, what a lot of people would do. Or it would be African American studies was the second one that most people would do.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. Yeah. Everybody kind of painted me as a slacker, which is not entirely untrue, but at the same time, I worked, I found a job my sophomore year of college, started putting away money. And I remember I was so proud of myself that I'd save up like $400 by fall quarter of my sophomore year, which is like, that's a lot of money. I was living in the dorms and everything. And I came home for Christmas break and spent it in a day. Went to the airport and put it all on one airplane. I said, how many hours do I get with this? And they're like, you get like 2.4 on the Hobbs. I said, okay.
I'll be back in 2.4 hours. Thank you.
Yeah. And off we went, and bank account went to zero. And I was like, well, I guess I got to go back to school and make some more money. And it continued that way. My dad had I don't mean to dwell on my private, but I had a fair number of ups and downs. So it might be
go for it. Yeah. I think a lot of people have ups and downs in their private training, and it takes people longer than some. Yeah.
Well, it took me 3 years start to finish, if that makes anybody feel any better.
It took me 3 years as well.
Yeah. Three summers, and I did some flying during the school year along the way, but yeah. And I was not half-assing it. I was working hard. But I was just distracted by college. I guess people think that's important.
Yeah, some people, depends on who you talk to, but yeah, college is important.
Yeah, well, my parents thought so.
Yeah, well, if major airlines want college, so if you want to be a major airline pilot, it's still important to them. But we don't know how long that's going to be.
Boy, I wonder. It seems like the standards are shrinking all the time. But yeah, but anyway, so I went back to school. And I'd had this, my dad had made me put every dollar I got from my grandparents for my whole life, like for graduation and birthday and Christmas, whatever. He made me put it all into a savings account. And he told me when I was a kid, one day you're going to really want to use this money for something valuable. And so I convinced my dad that summer, if the following, my second summer there, that I should use it for my private. And I had saved up some of my own money too. And I changed my major. My GPA went way back up since I got out of the calculus world. And
smart move.
Yeah. So he said, yeah, okay. So he, wasn't going to cost him anything. He thought it was a valuable, worthwhile use of that money. So that's what I did. He went to the bank and pulled it out for me and gave me like $2,500 in cash, which again was a lot of money for a college student. More money than I'd ever had in one place at one time, that's for sure. And I had probably $600 or $700 in my own money that I'd saved up throughout the school year. And my first instructor went away to the airlines. He got a job at SkyWest, so he was gone. So found a new instructor. The airplane I'd soloed was still at that same flight school. So a new instructor, Marco, and we just started flying again, picked up right where we left off, and banged out all the cross country stuff, all the solo stuff, did my long cross country, got my written done, just hammered on all that stuff as best I could. And it was the same thing. Eventually I spent my last dollar. I was like, damn it. It's just, like the worst case of, I didn't get all the way there, didn't get as much done as I wanted to do than you could think. But so anyway, went back up to school, found 2 more jobs. Most of my junior year, I actually worked 3 jobs.
Oh, wow. Wow, being a full-time student?
Yeah. I was actually running 17 or 18 credits because I was making up for some extra credits that didn't count when I was retaking calculus all those times. So I was still kind of behind as a student and trying to catch up because my financial aid money is only good for 4 years. And I don't have any money outside of that. I wouldn't have been able to go to school at all if it weren't for all that financial aid, let alone get a pilot's license. So, saved up some money, ended up staying in Seattle that third summer. And I kind of broke even just living in Seattle because I moved out of the dorms and now I had all these new expenses and I brought my car up here. So now I could afford to drive to and from the airport. I had a means to do that, but I didn't have any money for gas. So it was kind of a wash and I was kind of stuck. And, my birthday or Christmas, my parents would give me some money and I spend it at the airport or whatever. But what I did do that junior year was spend a lot of time that summer. All my free time, I was applying for scholarships to learn to fly. Every AOPA had a bunch, EAA had a bunch. I applied to scholarships for women in aviation because they said that they were open to men.
You're like, all right, I'll test this.
Yeah, what the hell?
Let me know. Did you win any?
No, not from them.
All right. No. Maybe next time.
Yeah. But Alaska Airlines had a scholarship that I applied for, and I ended up actually winning one scholarship that actually ended up being $3,500. It was an essay contest, and I wrote this essay about. So when I was a kid, one of the other experiences I had with aviation was my same uncle took me and my dad and mom and my grandpa and a bunch of people to an air show in Northern California. I think I was like 4 years old. And I remember just being, I didn't want to leave. It was like Disneyland for me. I did not want to leave. And I remember distinctly watching, I don't know if you know who Julie Clark is. She flies a polished T-34 and she got smoke on it. And one of her big things is she does a big heart in the sky. And I remember watching that as a kid going, holy crap, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I thought this was a cartoon. This is like Tailspin, but this is real life. And I had no idea that any of that stuff was real. And anyway, years later, through people I'd met volunteering at air shows, I ended up getting a ride with Julie Clark and doing some of her aerobatic routine. And so I wrote this big, long essay about it and ended up winning a scholarship, long story short, for $3,500, which was, that was enough. I had probably 30 to 35 hours and I just kind of needed, a couple hours of nighttime here, a couple hours under the hood there, maybe another cross country or 2 to refresh. And I was check ride ready, or so I thought. And so I thought $3,500, man, that's going to be enough. So that happened in August. I started back up at school, went and found the cheapest flight school with the jankiest airplanes I could find in the Seattle area.
Where is that? In case anyone else wants to know.
They don't exist anymore.
Oh, okay.
It was out of the Renton Airport. If you spent any time around the Renton Airport in around 2010 to 2012. You probably know who I'm talking about.
That's really funny. Sounds like they had a little bit of a reputation.
Yeah, they did, but it was cheap, and my money was going to go furthest there. And so I went out there, told them the whole deal, and they said, "Call me tell me when you want to tell." He goes, "Give us the scholarship committee people who are in charge of that. Give us their information. We're going to talk to them directly, find out how this is going to work." So I talk to scholarship people. They talk to scholarship people, and the scholarship people call me and they say, "Okay, here's how this is going to work. We can only pay for things that you're working towards your private. So if you need an hour of nighttime, we're going to pay for an hour of nighttime. We're not going to pay for 2. If you need an hour of this, we're not going to pay for an extra hour of that." I said, "Okay, well, that's fine." So I'd go fly. At the end of the flight, we'd write down on the invoice what we did and what I still needed work on from my instructor would write all that. And then I would sign it, and then they would mail it to the scholarship people. The scholarship people would mail back a check. That was how it was supposed to work.
Supposed to work.
Yeah. So I started flying, and my goal at this is like August. So school was getting ready to start, and I was going to, okay, let's try and get this done before the fog and the gray comes in Seattle. I don't know if you know that it's cloudy in Seattle a lot.
Yeah, I did my private pilot training in Columbus, Ohio, and it's no Seattle, but it's definitely not the sunniest place in the world.
Yeah, it's hard to do a check ride in the middle of winter in Seattle. So I started flying, and started finishing off checking all these boxes. Got the night done, got the cross countries done, got the solo stuff done, hood work was done, Towered Airport, all that stuff was done. And I'd probably flown 15 hours with them. So I had probably a $1,700 or $1,800 bill I'd racked up and done the same thing. Just signed the invoice, gave it back to them, and then forgot about it. I never heard about it again. So I go in there to fly one day, and this is probably not quite Thanksgiving, early November or something. And I go in there to fly, and my instructor's there, and it's, the weather's looking pretty good. And so I walk in there, and my instructor's at the front desk. He says, "Hey, why don't you go on into the office there? I'll be in a minute. We got to talk." Okay. Uh-oh. So I'm like, is the airplane broken? Did I do something wrong? What's going on? So he walks in there, and he goes, "Hey, this scholarship, these people have not paid us anything." He says, "We're out $1,800 right now, and these, they're a small family businesses. We can't float that for this long." He says, "So I can't let you leave here. We're not going to fly today, and I can't let you leave here until you give me one of 2 things. You can give me a check for $1,800, or you can give me your logbook as collateral."
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, yeah. So I was like, well, I can write you a check for $1,800.
You can try to cash it.
You can try. You can sit on it for however many years it's going to take before I put a balance in my checking account that big. Might be a while. I said, and I, under no circumstances am I giving you my logbook. Absolutely not. You're going to put it in a desk drawer, and somebody else is going to move it, and I'll never see it again. So I'm under no circumstances will I surrender my logbook to you. I'm going to work on getting you your money. I'm not going to stiff you. I'm going to work this out, but I'm not giving you my logbook. So these guys kind of hounded me for a while. I think they thought I was trying to scam them. I think, I gave a phone number and an email address to the scholarship committee, but they never met them face to face. And I think they might have thought that it was, my buddy Joe, gave him his phone number, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Stephen, he's got a scholarship." I think that's what they thought, and they thought I was just trying to scam them, which I get it. So they were starting to get kind of nasty, and I was starting to get upset with the scholarship people, and it kind of it finally started to settle down. And finally, I got the scholarship people to admit to me, this is like a month out of this goes by, and the guy goes, "Yeah, hey, I got to be honest with you, we're still trying to raise the money." I was, "You're still trying to raise the money?"
How do you give a scholarship away if you don't have the money?
That's what I thought. So Christmas break comes, and I head back to California, and I'm trying to sort out what I'm going to do about all this. My folks don't have the money. My brother had just started college, so they're, strapped sending him to school. And so I went to a different chapter of this organization that was in my hometown, where I didn't know a lot of the people, but I knew one person. her name was Iris. I knew her through the air show stuff, and she invited me to go to the meeting with some of the president of this other chapter, and I told them what had happened, and they were so appalled at the way everything had gone down that they offered to make things right on the other chapter's behalf. Which I didn't have to take them up on it because they just called them and put some pressure on them to sort this out. Unless this other group didn't want to be publicly chastised for it.
I mean, rightfully so, though. If you say you got something and you're offering this, you can't kind of get out of it like that. That's not how you run a business. That's not how you do things.
No. And I'm all for trying to help people, but even if he just called me and said, "Hey, we're still putting the money together. Don't start flying yet."
Yeah. All right. Okay. Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. Let me know when you have it. I'll start then.
Yeah. And now, it's Christmas time, Christmas break or whatever. So the weather in Seattle sucks. So I'm not going to get any flying done anytime soon. So I'm just kind of sitting on it. And eventually, it takes probably halfway through January or so, the scholarship committee pays my outstanding balance. And they tell me, said, "Okay, you've got this much money left. Do with it what you will." The flight school was happy now. But it was January in Seattle. And it's January in Seattle. I'm sitting in Seattle right now, and it's like half a mile visibility. So I'm not going to do any flying. So I'm just going to save the money for when the weather starts turning around, and focus on school and my job and whatever else, and get through the year. So I had an on-campus job of sitting. I sat at like a help desk, for visitors to campus. I'd give them campus maps and tell them wherever they were trying to give them directions and stuff. And a friend of mine worked in an office right down the way. And she came over, and she knew I was into airplanes and stuff. And she said to me, she said, "Hey, did you hear about that plane crash?" I said, "No. What are you talking about?" She goes, "Oh yeah, three fatal. There's a plane crashed in Mount Si like a week ago. This is like late February now." And I said, "Oh man, no, I didn't know anything about it." She goes, "Yeah, it was in the paper." She goes, I'll go get it." She goes into the office, grabs the newspaper, folds it up, hands it to me, and there was my instructor's picture.
Oh.
He flew 172. It was Valentine's Day night. And I remember that night. It was a crystal clear full moon night. And he went flying and took a couple of friends of his who'd been out on a Valentine's Day date. And it was like 10 o'clock. He let himself into the flight school, grabbed a key to one of the airplanes, went flying. And I don't know if he went into IMC, but he ended up flying into Mount Si, and all three of them died.
Man, that's so sad.
It was awful. And, and for me, I'm trying to learn to fly. I'm trying to convince my parents this is what I want to do. I'm trying to explain to my friends why I spend so much time at the airport and stuff. And none of them are airplane people, and they don't get it.
They just see how much bad luck you're having. They're like, "Dude, why are you still doing this?" Like, seriously. You're telling me this and I'm questioning. I'm like, why are you still doing this?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
It's just indicative of how badly you want something. All these obstacles are just opportunities to prove how badly you want something. And I truly believe that.
Building character and you're building your story.
Exactly. Calculus was an obstacle for me to prove how badly I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, which was not very badly. So, I didn't really find a way to persevere at that. But when it came to flying, to me, it was 100% worth it. And,
did you ever think about quitting at all when this was going on? Did you ever you obviously had a bunch of unfortunate events and had the scholarship people, like what kind of scholarship doesn't pay? I don't know if that's normal or not, but I feel like at that point I would have been like, wow, maybe the universe or God doesn't want me to be a pilot. Maybe I should try to do something else. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah, there were a couple days where I showed up at my friend's house and went immediately to the kitchen and pour myself big drinks. Right, I'd get home and pour, make myself absolutely. Like a Jack with an ounce of Coke in it, and there was that kind of stuff. And it seems like I had enough else going on at the time that I never really thought about it. I never considered quitting, to be honest, at least not consciously. It was just not an option for me. But the dust all settled from all of that. I still had $1,700 or $1,800, something like that. And I went back to the same flight school and I said, "Hey, everything's cool, right? I know I know we had this accident, and I know it's sad and everything, but we've still got airplanes. We've still got other instructors, right? I really want to finish this up. And they go, yep, we're all good. We're going to press forward. I said, okay. So I found a new instructor, and this guy, his name was Donald. He was a real nice guy, young guy. He's probably only a year older than I was. And he was fresh out of Washington State, which they have an aviation program there, and or Central Washington, I guess. And he had 300 hours, and he was my CFI, and I was his very first student, and banged out the rest of the requirements, got my steep turns polished up, all that stuff ready to go, and took a check ride, and my check ride went so poorly. Let me rephrase it. I thought it was going really poorly. The guy I took the check ride with was a complete jerk. At one point, he took my sectional off my lap and threw it in the back because he was mad at me.
For what?
I don't even remember. I think I did. I entered into slow flight. I'd done clearing turns and everything, and he accused me of not looking outside.
Oh, okay.
Just crazy thing. So, and he was seriously berating me from takeoff to landing. And I thought I did so poorly, but really in hindsight, now knowing what I know now, I'm sure I was well within, the standards for all my maneuvers and everything. I think he was just putting the pressure on, and he certainly did. We pulled into the
mission successful, dude. Jeez.
We pulled into the chocks, and he asked me, and he had told me before we went flying, he says, if I haven't told you to go back to the airport yet, it means you haven't failed yet. So if you're still flying, if you're still going, just keep going. No matter what I say, which I should have taken that advice a little more seriously, but
yeah, but that's hard though. When you're in the situation, you just continue to get down on yourself over and over again. When you do one thing you think that it merits a failure, then that can kind of screw up your whole check ride.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And especially when the guy's yelling at you. But we pulled into the chocks, and he said, how do you think you did? I said, I have no idea. I just wanted to get out of the airplane.
I just want to get away from you.
I can't believe I gave you $500.
Yeah, to yell at me the whole time.
Yeah. And he says, well, congratulations, you just got your private pilot's license. I said, are you shitting me?
You're like, please sign this, and I never want to see you again. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's how that went. And so I had my private, and I got my private 3 weeks after I graduated from college, which was pretty cool. And I remember graduating from college and then graduating and getting my private, and how much of a bigger deal getting my private felt to me. It was pretty awesome. 2 days after I got my private, I loaded up my Jeep and drove back down to California, and put all my stuff at my folks' house. And some of the people I had met along the way was the Collings Foundation. They fly a B-17, a B-24, a B-25, and Mustang, all that stuff. And so I had made some contacts there. I'd even spent some time on the road with them, and called them up and said, hey, I'm free and I'm looking for something to do. They said, yeah, come on out. So I spent 5 months on tour with them, drinking my way across the Midwest.
I was say, what all did you do? What all did you do for him?
I was technically a flight engineer, but it's not it is a required crew position, but you don't have to be an actual flight engineer. You're kind of just like a third guy in the cockpit. You can't pump the gear down from the seats of the bombers.
Make sure the throttles are all the way forward on takeoff.
Yeah, set the friction lock, and just an extra set of eyes, really. And when there's passengers on board and you're giving rides, you're kind of a babysitter.
Gotcha. He's gonna throw up. Take him out.
Yeah. And basically just interface with the passengers so that the pilots don't have to while they're flying.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So I traveled around with them for 5 or 6 months, and I had a ton of fun. But it is a good time if you ever get the opportunity to go out and see those guys. I recommend it. But it's 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you don't get paid for it. They cover a hotel room and stuff for you. So I did that. But while I was out there, I called Dennis Sanders, who is a warbird restoration guy. He started out in Chino, California, and he's been racing at Reno for 35 years now. He just won Reno last year, 2019. And called him up, who was another guy I'd met. So I started volunteering at air shows. Then you start to meet the guys who bring the airplanes to the air shows, and you start volunteering for them. So Dennis knew who I was. I spent a lot of time on weekends out at his place working on. He's got a number of airplanes in addition to the customer airplanes that he works on. But called him up out of the blue and just said, "Hey, I'm out here with Collings. I'm kind of burning out on it, and I'd like to come spend some time in the shop. If that's okay with you, if I wouldn't be in your way." He says, "Man, I'll hire you." And hired me over the phone. We didn't talk about pay. We didn't talk about benefits. All we talked about was start date. And so I came back to Sacramento, got my Jeep fixed up, and started driving. It was about a 45-minute commute for me, and I've been there ever since.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I've done a lot of really cool things being around the warbird world and met a lot of great people. The warbird guys, I think, kind of get a bad rap in general. It's kind of a clique. People think it's kind of this exclusive group, but they welcomed me into it for some reason. And I'm no particularly talented guy when it comes to maintaining airplanes, but I was a volunteer. I showed up without an agenda. I just wanted to learn.
I think that's part of the thing, though. They want to see people, they want to surround themselves with other people that love aviation or are willing to volunteer, because so many people probably want to get paid, especially when they're up and coming. They don't see the benefit of volunteering your time and doing this for free, and to understand that the relationships you're going to mold and create are going to be able to pay off in your future. So I think that was really smart of you. Yeah.
And truthfully, I had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, I could have spent my Saturdays, sitting around watching TV and playing video games, or I could have gone out to the airport and gotten my hands dirty and doing, cleaning spark plugs and greasing wheel bearings and stuff like that. And I just had a lot more fun doing that and being with, these guys who fly some of these old airplanes are some of the best pilots you'll find.
Yeah, absolutely.
And learning from those guys. And not only that, but they paid me enough that I was able to start getting ratings. So I never really committed to my instrument rating, but eventually I locked that down. I got at a certain point, I wanted to branch out a little more and do a little more flying. So that's when I reached out to Kenmore Air. A friend of a friend kind of gave me an email address. He'd flown there years ago. And he gave me an email address for somebody to email and just inquire about any open positions, which I did in 2014. And 15, sorry. 2015, I started out there as again, I took a substantial pay cut just to go learn. And I wanted to go get a foot in the door. And I like old airplanes, and Beavers and Otters, if you don't know, are old airplanes.
They're so cool, though.
They are cool. They got a lot of character to them. And I knew that, I took the pay cut for one summer, and I worked on the docks. I kind of managed. They usually got a bunch of high school and college kids that essentially line service, but you're on docks. And they hired me into a management position for I had 8 or 10 kids or something that I made sure didn't fall in the water.
It's a huge role. It's probably harder than one would think, right?
Well, you're kind of a glorified lifeguard. But no, it was a good gig. And I've been with Kenmore seasonally for the last 5 years. So I spent one summer there on the docks. The following winter, I got my CFI. Went back and they needed an instructor, and they really like to hire from within, especially when it comes to the pilot roles and stuff. And so they hired me to fly. They got a pair of Super Cubs on floats at the time. They've now got a 172 also. So I did something like, I did 22 seaplane ratings in 5 months.
Wow.
For guys. I did 2,500 landings in 5 months.
Oh my goodness, dude, you were getting after it.
Well, and that's actually probably a conservative estimate, because you can easily do 20 landings in an hour. And if all of your students are doing seaplane ratings and nothing else, that's what you do. You just go do landings.
That's crazy. Step back a little bit. How was the rest of your training? Because obviously your private took forever, had every single obstacle you'd ever imagined. Did that continue throughout your other training, or was your other training pretty smooth?
Other than being expensive, it wasn't bad. My instrument rating, I did not enjoy it to this day. I don't particularly enjoy instrument flying.
What's it about that you don't enjoy it?
Truthfully, it's because all the instrument flying I've done has been single engine piston, which, if you're shooting an approach down to minimums in a single engine piston, you probably ought to rethink your risk profile, in my opinion.
I mean, if you have a nice brand new Cirrus, and maybe, I don't know, but I know what you mean. Like,
yeah,
I do know what you mean.
Yeah. Well, in a Cirrus, you've got a FADA, you probably got like a coupled autopilot that makes it pretty easy too. My instrument, I just wasn't interested. I like doing lots of maneuvers. I've kind of learning my way into aerobatics and formation, and that was the stuff I really wanted to do more of. And instrument flying is the complete opposite of that. So it was just not super exciting to me. But eventually I had a buddy who was working on his, and he had a 172, and we worked out a deal where I'd help take care of the 172 and pay for my half of the fuel. And we got our instrument ratings together in that airplane. And until it became really easy for me to do, like it was on a plate right in front of me, did I really take the opportunity to do it? Otherwise, it was costing me a couple $100. I'm going to spend $200 to go flying. I want to go do steep turns. I want to go somewhere for lunch. I want to go do stalls. I don't really want to put the foggles on and not even have a view.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense because you're a private pilot. You want to have fun. You want to enjoy it, especially when you had all the stuff that popped up and people trying to take your logbook from you. It's like, darn right, I'm going to go enjoy this right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
What was your original? All right, here's a question. So when you first started flying, was your original goal ever to go to the airlines, or did you just wanted to fly for fun?
What I used to tell people is everybody would ask that. I used to tell people, I just want to fly fun airplanes. I want to fly cool airplanes. And if I reached a point where I thought a 737 was the next cool airplane I wanted to fly, or a Dash 8 or an RJ, then that's what I would go pursue. I haven't reached that point yet, and I don't think I will. But I'm just going to take it as it comes. When I was in college, I was looking at the B-17 and the B-24 and the P-51. I was involved with callings, and those are the airplanes I wanted to fly. When I got involved with the Sanders Group, Dennis had, at that time, he had a Luscombe. He has an N3N, which is an old biplane, kind of like a Stearman. He had a T6. Those are the airplanes I wanted to fly. And when I came to Seattle and I was in college and I was watching these float planes fly around all the time, listening to the 985, the Beaver, radial engine flying over all the time, those are the airplanes I wanted to fly. And I haven't really chased a job as much as I've chased airplanes, which is kind of weird. It's kind of not a great way to go about it, truthfully. But it served me really well.
I mean, it just goes to show that there's so many ways to make your path in this industry, and you don't have to be an airline pilot. That's one of the things I love about this podcast is we highlight things other than airlines, Yeah. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being an airline pilot, and you can make a lot of money doing it. You can have a lot of fun doing it. You can fly some really cool planes. You can also be an airline pilot and still volunteer for a Collings Foundation. So like you can do all this, and it's great. And you can also make a career out of it, which is something that you're probably doing right now. And you want to fly cool airplanes, which I can guarantee you that a lot of people flying the airlines or corporate think what you're doing is probably more fun than what they're doing, because you are truly having fun when you fly. You're not necessarily being told that you have to go fly through these thunderstorms to get these people to where they want to go, So like you're making and creating your own path in aviation, and everyone tailors aviation to what they want to do. They just all do it a little bit differently. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a great way to look at it. It's worked for me. I've been able to be somewhat successful at it. I don't make a lot of money, but I have a lot of fun, and the money I don't earn is, I kind of think of it as like it's money I'm spending to have all this fun. And at the end of the day, it's a hell of a bargain. I haven't done the math this yet, but in 2018, I burned 10,000 gallons of avgas. Like jet fuel is one thing, but avgas, not many people are burning that much avgas. And the other cool thing, one of my motivating factors was I didn't want to build time in the right seat of something. I could have sat in the right seat of a Caravan. I could have sat in the right seat of, a King Air, just sitting there yanking gear, or a 310 or something like that. That didn't appeal to me. I'm not a control freak, but I don't want to be a side.
You still want to be at the controls. Yeah.
Yeah, which was great about Kenmore is all the airplanes are single pilot. So I had about 300 hours on floats when they cut me loose in a beaver. And they're like, yeah, here's 6 people, pick them up and take them to Friday Harbor. And
you're like, what? Excuse me?
Yeah, I remember.
Where is that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you get checked out in the Beaver, whatever. And Beaver is a great airplane. It's really honest. It's really easy to fly, really stable. It's got some quirks to it. The ailerons aren't that great, but it's a fun airplane to fly. It doesn't excite you with the performance numbers, but it's not fast. But it's a great airplane. And I came to it fairly quickly and picked it up pretty quick. And I remember, so you get your 135 right in the Beaver, right? And then you got to do, for us, it's a fairly extensive IOE period. I think the GOM requires 15 hours of IOE, but most of the guys are running north of 20, just because there's so many destinations. There's so many different places or conditions in all these destinations with different wind. And, when you go land on a runway every time, you're going to get relatively similar conditions every time. Landing in the water, you got boats, you've got swell, you've got terrain in the immediate vicinity of the runway. I mean, imagine if you had, trees right up to the edge of the runway, or even a mountain right up to the edge of the runway. There's lots of wind and updrafts and downdrafts associated with that kind of terrain that we operate near. And so there's a lot of little things to pick up along the way. It's more than just landing on the water. It's knowing where you can land, where you can't, where are the noise sensitive neighbors and stuff like that. So there's a lot of IOE, but once you finish IOE, so now you got the senior pilot in the right seat for like 20 hours. And he says, okay, yeah, you're good to go, man. Have fun. And you go and you pick up 6 people and the thing's heavy and you're put the power up on takeoff. And you look over and like, who the hell is this guy in the right seat? What's he going to do?
That's hilarious.
Is he going to grab the mixture and pull it? Is he going to, start messing with stuff? That's never happened to me, but it's just one of the goofy things you just don't know. It's one of these unknowns. And there's so many of those little things flying single pilot that you just don't know about.
Yeah, it's true. I have about 2,000 hours flying single pilot. So definitely interesting. It's definitely a different world.
Oh, it is. I enjoy it. And it's nice kind of being able to throw on a podcast or something. Listen to Pilot podcast when I'm cruising up to San Juan Island. And,
good plug.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's a fun time. I really dig it.
What's do you see a career at Kenmore? Do you see that as being a place where you want to stay forever, or do you think it's just having fun right now and you'll see what's next in a couple of years?
I'm having fun now. So I did 2 summers in the Beaver, and then they checked me out in the Turbine Otter. So I've got some turbine time under my belt. But Kenmore doesn't really fly anything bigger than that. They've got turbine Beavers and 180s, and I've got a little time in each of those, but I didn't get to go through. I haven't gone through the checkout process, so I don't fly those on the line. So I don't know. There's other airplanes in my gun sights. I started flying a T6, the warbird version, like a little over 2 years ago, and I've been having a ton of fun with that, doing some aerobatic stuff, going to formation clinics. I fly a biplane. I do some fun with that, and then this last summer I got checked out in a TBM. Not the corporate TBM. There's a TBM before that from World War II.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that before.
Yep. It was built by Grumman. It was a torpedo bomber. George H.W. Bush Sr. flew one in World War II. I got checked out on that, and it's huge. It's like 18,000 pounds. It's single pilot. Wow. It's a single pilot 18,000 pound airplane, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's not. You don't see those very often.
No. So I've got some flights planned in it, and got typed in it back in September. And I don't know what other airplanes are going to get thrown my way, but I'm kind of just things are going really well right now, so I kind of don't want to disturb the momentum.
Based on where you are now and how you've gotten to where you are today, do you think if you had the opportunity to go back and change anything, would you do anything differently?
I probably would have gotten been a little more motivated to get my commercial and CFI earlier. not so much because I wanted to work as a CFI, but just because I had some friends that I could have helped out if I were a CFI at that time. You know, I got some free dual when I was working on my instrument rating from a friend of mine who's a double I. And that was a really big help when you got somebody who's willing to fly for you and not charge you. That was a big deal. And I've since been able to do some of that, but the nice thing is I still have a CFI. I still enjoy instructing. I enjoy teaching people to fly. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to teach somebody how to pass a private pilot check ride or a commercial pilot check ride, but I'm going to teach you how to fly. So I like doing like BFRs and tail wheel endorsements and seaplane ratings, and I stay busy doing that kind of stuff.
So when I come out to Seattle or wherever you are, you can give me my tail wheel and my seaplane.
Man, I don't have a tail dragger out here. The tail dragger stuff I fly is down in California. So by the time we figure it out, you'll get one. Don't worry. I have faith in you. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, let's do it. I'm in.
Yeah,
we'll
that'd be cool. That's awesome.
That hard. That's the secret.
No. What's I guess another question is, you kind of said you had some planes in your sights. What's kind of your dream list of airplanes to fly?
I feel like I'm maybe on the verge to start flying some of the fighters. I have gotten an hour of dual in a P-51. And that was so far, I've got a little over 2,000 hours, and like my shining moment, the one that I tell everybody about, is like my 1 hour of dual in a Mustang that I got this summer. And so I'd like to do, I'm hoping for more Mustang flights. Who knows? I've got some T6 time. I've got another warbird type rating under my belt, and I'm kind of getting some street cred that comes along with it. And I don't know if anybody's really wants to throw me the keys to their Mustang and say, yeah, man, give it a shot. See how it goes. But,
good luck.
But yeah. There's some dual control ones out there. And I truthfully, I think about that every day, and I try to keep that in the gun sight, stay focused on it. And I think it'll happen maybe sometime soon. I hope.
That's exciting, man. I hope it does too. I mean, it's really cool to talk to you and hear about how you just have this passion for warbirds or just kind of cool airplanes. And I feel like every pilot has that same passion for cool airplanes, but we kind of go to the side where we'd rather go to the airlines or corporate and focus on making money, but we don't realize is like how much fun we have actually flying those cool airplanes. So you're doing such a cool part of aviation. You're living like the most fun part of aviation every single day. And I think that's really cool. I like that.
Well, thanks. No, it's nice to hear that every once in a while, because, I see lots of my friends are moving on to airlines, and they're, I'm coming up on, I'll be 30 this year, it sucks.
I turned 30. What's today? Did I turn 30 2 days ago now? I turned 32 days ago.
Oh, so dude. How did it go?
It's rough, man. It's rough. But I came out with my first YouTube video. It was my goal to come out with a YouTube video on my 30th birthday, and I did it. So I'm a YouTuber now. Big things. I'm going to kill the 30s. It's going to be great. Yep. It's over. Man. It's past, and now I'm here.
As optimistic as you are. I've got like 4 months to go.
It's all right. Come talk to me. I'll help you out.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so I'm just in a position where I was making enough money to live comfortably. Not making enough money to buy a house, not making enough money to drive a fancy car or anything. But I'm not starving. I live comfortably. I've got a decent apartment in Seattle, and my girlfriend helps out with that a lot. Most of it, especially this time of year when I'm not here. But, I was just in a position where I was able to pursue those things. And it's not because I'm more driven than anybody else. I think it's just because I was in a position where I had the opportunity, and I just lucked into the right situation. And if you don't spend time at the airport, you won't luck into those situations. I wasn't sitting at home one day and somebody called me and said, hey man, you want to come get checked out in a Beaver? You want to come get checked out in the T6? Those things happened because I was at the airport. I was putting in time when I wasn't getting paid for it. I was meeting people. I was having fun. And yes, my motivation from the outset was to fly cool stuff and get cool flying experience. But my motivation now is more to one, take care of the people who helped set me up with those opportunities. And two, these people have kind of become my family. I mean, I'm at the airport 6-7 days a week. That's where I spend my time on weekends. You can ask my girlfriend; she drives you nuts. That's where I want to be, and I'm, I'm lucky that I get to do that 7 days a week. And that it feeds me, it sustains me, it gets me through the day. Not everybody feels that way about most of the things they do.
No, I'd say you are very rare in that, and not everyone shares that same passion of what they do for a living.
Well, like I said, that comes down to luck, and I don't know what I did to deserve it,
but you're here. It's all that matters.
It also might be a curse,
depending on who you ask.
Yeah, I miss out on some life events and stuff like that because of my obsession out at the airport. But it's hard to. I guess it's just hard to keep it balanced. But yeah, it depends who you ask. And I'm having fun in the short term. It's working out. So,
and then one good thing is, if you ever realize, like, hey, I want to make a little money, it's like, all right, well, I still have this valuable time. I still have these great stories. I can still go to an airline. You're about to turn 30. If you want to go to an airline today or a regional airline, you could still have a 35-year career at an airline. So, like, you're still doing pretty good. So,
yeah, and that's one thing I've realized as of late is there's not many people that are applying to flying jobs who have, a P-51 experience. Or anything like that. And unless you own a Mustang, typically guys who don't know how to fly are not getting the opportunity to fly Mustangs. not these days. So, it's some real street cred. And I think when people see it in your logbook, it's kind of like, oh, this guy might know what he's doing. In my case, it's not true. I don't know what I'm doing, but
you're figuring it out as you go, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's fun. Well, hey, man, I got a quick section for you. I got a quick rapid fire section, and then we can kind of wrap it up. But before we go, like I said, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you just sharing your story. I mean, just from what you had to go through and some of the stories you're talking about getting your private pilot license, it's just crazy. And this is what you want to do, and you're going after it, and you're living your dream. You're flying airplanes that you love to fly. So it's really cool. But rapid fire section, just answer the first and quickest thing that comes to your mind.
Okay, hit me with it.
What's your favorite airplane you've ever flown?
Mustang.
What's your least favorite airplane you've ever flown?
Man. Sea Ray.
Okay. What is the ugliest airplane you've ever seen?
You know what a Sherpa is?
I don't, but it sounds ugly, so we can count it.
I think it's called a Sherpa. It's like the Army airplane that a lot of the paratroopers jump out of, the Golden Knights. The jump teams and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
That thing's hideous.
You might get some hate for that one, but I'll direct them your way, not my way.
I've never flown one. This is me judging a book by its cover. It might be a great airplane. I don't know anything about it.
What's the best looking airplane you've ever seen, other than a Mustang? Since I think you would probably say Mustang.
Best looking airplane. The Super Corsair. There was a red and white Super Corsair that was restored by a guy named Bob Odegaard, and it had a Pratt & Whitney 4360 on it, which is the biggest piston engine ever put on an airplane.
Nice.
The Navy built 10 of them after World War II. This guy named Cook Cleland bought three of them, and took them and raced them at the Cleveland Air Races in the late 40s. And one of those airplanes still exists, and it's got an awesome red and white paint scheme, sunburst paint scheme, and it's a Corsair with an extra 1,000 horsepower. So
that's pretty cool.
That's the coolest airplane I've ever seen.
So obviously you said that you love aviation, or you love airplanes, you're in it for flying the type of airplanes. Is there an airliner that kind of sticks out to you as something you'd really want to fly? Like a 787, the old Concorde, like it can be old or it can be new. That was an airliner.
If you're thinking more modern, I would say the 747. If there were anything that were going to get me to go to an airline right now, of any airplanes that still fly, and the 747 is barely hanging in there. But if British Airways, I don't even know if they still have them, but
Lufthansa.
If Lufthansa called me tomorrow and said, "Hey man, you want to come fly 747-400?" I'd be like, "Okay, let's go."
Well, you got to learn German first, but other than that, you're on.
Yeah. But as far as other airliners, I'm not really into the technology thing like I probably should be. If there's one place I'm a little less interested in, it would be that kind of stuff. But I'm into the old analog stuff, and 747 being all analog, I think is pretty cool for as big an airplane as it is.
Who is one person, either living or dead, that has influenced aviation that you would like to meet? So it could be like Bob Hoover, it could be Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, like anyone from any time period that has just made a huge difference in aviation that you would wish you could meet.
Oh man, I actually got to meet Hoover once. And that was pretty damn cool. I'd be lying if I said it didn't have an impact on me. I'll stick with Hoover. Yeah.
Okay.
I wish I'd been able to talk with him for more than 5 minutes. But that was all I got.
Still, it's 5 minutes more than most people.
Hey, the handshake was worth the wait, man.
Yep, absolutely. That's really cool. Let's see. Piper or Cessna for like a training aircraft? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I gave up on the 172. I wasn't a huge 172 fan. So I got my private in the Warrior, and I think it's a better flying airplane, truthfully. What about you? Did you fly the Warrior or did you fly a
No, I did a 172. So my two options were a 152 or 172, and a 172 felt like an SUV compared to a 152. So I did the 152, but then I did my commercial training in a Piper Arrow, and I love that plane. It was
Arrow was all right. Yeah.
It was slow, but like I really enjoyed it. It was my first complex airplane, so obviously there's some really cool things to it when I was flying it, but it felt like my first real airplane, and every plane since then has felt like my first real airplane. So
it was my first complex airplane too. Like when you did your first, do you remember like your first takeoff in the Arrow? Did you just like rotate, keep it in ground effect, and suck the gear up like everybody knows what they're doing? Because that's what I did, and my instructor was pissed. He's like, "What are you doing?" That's
really funny. I didn't do that. I should have.
Yeah. Maybe there's a little cowboy in me. I probably should have.
That's funny. But no, it's all good, man. Let's see. Would you rather fly over mountains, beaches, the country, or cities?
I would combine the beaches and mountains, because some of the places we fly to in Kenmore Air, especially up in BC, the mountains come right to the beach. There'll be a 4,000 foot tall mountain that the peak is a half a mile from the shoreline. So, it's like a cliff face. It's awesome. And flying below the terrain, we're legal to cruise at 500 feet. And you can see everything at 500 feet. You can count the leaves on the trees as they go by. And it's really cool. It's actually pretty breathtaking.
Are you guys always on IFR flight plans?
No,
or is it VFR?
We are day VFR.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah, 100% VFR. Now, we have reduced minimums. We don't go through weather. We go under it, So we're legal to cruise at 500 as long as we're over water, landable water. And it was actually, they were legal to cruise 200 up until, I think, 2011 or so. So they were cruising pretty low to the water for a long time.
Wow. What's that? That's just Kenmore Air, 200 feet above the water. Is that legal? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as long as you got, I think it's 502 miles is the visibility requirements now. And I think in those days it was 200. It might have been 1 mile. But if you're at 200 feet, you'll hit a cruise ship.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They're coming and going from Seattle all the time.
Yeah, they are.
So, but no, I think the 500 rule is a good place. It's a happy place to be. It still takes you 2 minutes to climb that altitude some days on a hot day when you're at gross, so
that's very true.
Feels like higher than it is. But it's pretty cool. It's a really good place to get a perspective of the landscape from.
What's your favorite airport you've ever landed at?
I go to the Chino Air Show every year. In the last few years, I've been fortunate enough to fly a warbird into the Chino Air Show. And that is always pretty exciting. I flew the T6 in there last year, and you call up a tower. We don't really talk to usually flight following, especially in Southern California or anything. They're not as conducive to what I want to do sometimes. So I kind of try to avoid the airspace instead of talk to them. And when you call up Chino Tower on air show weekend, on the Friday before the air show, and for the 10 miles you're talking to them on the way into the airport, they're like, North American 800 Charlie, come left 10 degrees, fly to 4 Mustangs off your right. And 4 Mustangs go, that's pretty cool. And every time you get to go into Chino on an air show weekend, there's airplanes everywhere. They've got controllers that really know what they're doing. And I don't know how many times I've gotten to see goofy airplanes, P-38s, P-47s, P-51s, ME-109s, Focke-Wulf 190s, B-17s. All that stuff they're all flying the same weekend. So some of that stuff's going to be in the pattern when you get there. And then to try and mesh in, because the Mustang's going 150 miles an hour in the on downwind basically, and I'm going 115, 120. So I'm trying to sequence in between these guys, and they're coming in a flight of 4. Yeah, so it's kind of hectic and crazy, and but you get on the ground, you're like, man, that was awesome. So I would have to say that's probably my favorite, my favorite one that I do.
What's your least favorite airport?
My least favorite airport, Kenmore Air. We go to a place, I guess it's not an airport, but we go to a place called Gorge Harbor, and it is it's probably maybe 2 miles wide, and it's like a donut shaped inlet. It's saltwater. It's on an island called Cortez Island, and it's up in BC, and there's a donut shaped inlet where there's water in the shape of a donut and a big island in the middle that's maybe 200-300 feet tall, and you got to land inside there, which is not that big a deal. But man, trying to get out of there on a hot day, you end up doing a 360 inside, trying to keep it over the terrain, over the water, trying to climb up out of this thing. In the Otter, it's not as much of a deal, especially, the Turbine Otter now has got all this extra horsepower and stuff, so it's fine. But trying to get out of there on a hot day in a Beaver, it sucks. It's really pretty and really scenic, and all the people are like looking out the windows, taking pictures. And I'm
You're sweating bullets.
Yeah.
Please take off. Please climb. Please climb. Please climb.
If only you people knew.
That's really funny.
It's not that bad. I guess it's probably the safe thing to say in a situation like this when you don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, everyone knows what you actually mean. Yeah,
it can feel like it sometimes.
That's fun.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Those are pretty much all the questions I have for you. Like I said earlier, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun talking with you. I can't wait to have this episode out and kind of tell your story a little more.
Yeah, man. I don't know how many people will feel motivated or anything by my story, but I try and if it brings people half as much joy and happiness as it's brought me, then I think aviation will succeed and will continue to grow. And I hope it does. And I think what you're doing is awesome. And I wish I'd found something like this when I was learning to fly. I might have had a little more gas in the tanks to do what I was trying to do.
I appreciate it, man. That means a lot. I really do. I think that a lot of people like your story, and I think it's going to help out. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
No problem, man. Have a great day.
Hey, you too.
Thanks. And that is a wrap of episode 92 of the Pilot to Pilot podcast. I hope you enjoyed Stephen's story as much as I did, and hearing more about what Kenmore Air is like and how flying for fun can just be such a great way to go about aviation, especially when training gets tough, especially when your job gets tough. Just remember why you love aviation and that this is supposed to be fun. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. As I said earlier, leave us a review. Check out our website, pilottopilot.hq.com. Email me if you want someone to be on the podcast or you think you should be on the podcast. pilottopilot.hq@gmail.com. Avination, that's all I have for you today. I hope I can get a video out here soon. I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to just make it happen, but we'll see. So stay tuned for that. And as always, happy flying.